President Trump, in his national security speech yesterday, wants us to be confused about a very important point, and that is the distinction between America and the United States. He talks in his presentation about absorbing the free enterprise system, the American economy, into the national security state. We have the economy becoming not just about the genius of the American people and their investment and their capital, their ideas, their international trade. It's not just about that. It is, in fact, a security interest, a military. It is to be put to use to the military, or put to the use of the military of this country, the federal military that has military actions, combat actions going on in many countries, in I think more than 150 different countries around the world. The federal power is asserting itself in the name of some ostensible good. He says, President Trump says that because of our people, America has been among the greatest forces for peace and justice in the history of the world. Well, that is really a laughable statement. But he's playing on a confusion. The confusion is, in your mind, the distinction between America and the United States, because in your mind, you, my listener, think that they are the same thing. And yet America is not the United States. The United States is the States United, the government, the agent created by these handful of colonies or states in the late 1700s. And they have become, of course, the United States Incorporated, the gigantic empire and financial combine that has absorbed much of the top part of the economy, the so-called moneyed interests. They are part of the government, and as talk show hosts in the past year have been pointing out, and as if it had just been discovered, it is part of the deep state, the deep American state that is all about business and all about the prosperity of the elite 1%. Of course, I understate that by implying that the top 1% are a very small number, but indeed the actual number is, I would expect probably smaller than that. Probably no more than 5,000 or 6,000 people at the very top of the heap in the American economy. That is the economy that President Trump seems to be proposing to defend, and seems to be proposing to view as a military operation. We have to protect this economy. We are all about security. We are all about the strength of the American machine, right? The American military and economic and regulatory machine working on the outside of the country in military and paramilitary operations, and buyouts of countries. We simply buy countries out and take over their productive domestic assets. And then also internally through the states, which have no longer the real dignity of states that they once were defended. Right in the South, they defended their integrity against the Yankee invasion, and before that, when the Constitution was being debated, the pro-state perspective that lost, typified by Patrick Henry, they warned against centralization, against against unification of all the nation's powers in Washington. That's what they warned against. And we have what was intended in the Constitution. We have exactly what Alexander Hamilton wanted. And he was not really making secret about the fact that he wanted a powerful central state. At the beginning, in that time, the beginning of the concept of the state. The state is something apart from the people. It is even apart from the government. And our argument is this: what is the argument here on the David Tulis Show? We're not a show that really touches on the national claim at all. I figure you hear enough about that in the national news, though I suspect that much of what passes for news and analysis is simply reaffirmation of the centralizing tendencies of the past decades, the past 150 years, and are not really giving you means to think more carefully about what's really right for you, right? What's the best thing for you? The best for your family, the best for your estate, your business, and your inheritance, right? You're thinking, the reason you're working so hard now is you're working on an inheritance. You're trying to pass something on to other people. Now, these people, for most of us, will be our children. But for some, the inheritance that they're passing on is an inheritance of ideas, right? If if you are a man of ideas, you're a writer, let's say, or a minister, what you're really wanting to have is you're reaping souls. If you're in the gospel ministry, you're reaping adherence to your ideas, and your the doctrine that you've discovered as a professor, right? That might be that's the inheritance. That's why you're working so hard, because you want people to understand what you have discovered, right? That's why you profess every day at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga your findings and your convictions. That's why you're there in a ministry of information. Well, President Trump argues essentially against local economy. And what I like to do often is to simplify things for myself so I can understand them. I have a piece of paper with a line down the middle, right? And at the top, on the left-hand column, I have global. Today, I have global role, and on the right-hand column, which is us, I have city and neighborhood, right? Because these are the two things that are in view in his argument for the national security state. And what is funny about President Trump, his inauguration speech was probably the best speech ever given at that podium, probably the best ever, because he reflected the reasons that the people voted for him and what they are expecting from him. They're expecting a restoration of lost things, and because many of the people who supported him are conservatives, they want the conservative form of the modern total state, right? Which the liberals accept, and they're working for it too, but with different emphases in their public statements. But his speech did reflect probably what you think. And now, since a year is almost up in the first quarter of his term, these points have been forgotten. But he says in his well, let me tell you what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show this distinction. Okay, you got the line down the middle. In a nutshell, on one side, you've got on the Trump side, you've got nation building. You have one capital. You have economic security. You have the industrial might of the country. All of course are feeding the federal leviathan through taxation. You have the commercial interest. You have debt, and you have leverage. That's down one side. You have national claims upon the world, which he says America has been the greatest forces for peace and justice in the history of the world. Well, the Americans are not peaceful people. They are a military people. They're an invasive species, as it were, widely hated around the world. And they have generated the terrorism problem by their invasion of the Middle East, right? They have brought that upon themselves. And now, because there's lashback among individuals and some groups in the Middle East, Muslim activists, Muslim identifying people, right? They're going to kill as many Westerners, as many infidels as they can, and make a point against us in their activities of terror. So there's a war that we've created of our doing. And President Bush, in his very, very interesting speech yesterday, the copy of which I got from Al Jazeera, by the way. I did a search on transcript President Bush security speech, and the first offering was from Al Jazeera. Apparently, it had gotten it from the White House, the Muslim multimedia platform. He says that he cites several failures. And he talks about the borders, wanting to, of course, living in fear of strangers. And he says, American citizens, as usual, have been left to bear the cost and pick up the tab. On top of everything else, our leaders drifted from the American principles. They lost sight of America's destiny. They lost their belief in America's greatness. As a result, our citizens lost something as well. And that is, as he goes on to say, confidence in their government, and eventually even lost confidence in their future. Part of restoration of this confidence is a huge military buildup. We are demanding extraordinary strength, which he says will hopefully lead to long and extraordinary peace. We are giving our courageous military men and women the support they need and so dearly deserve. As if somehow, an engorged federal defense budget is a necessary expression of thanks for people who've made the sacrifice, right? Either in death or in separating themselves from their families to serve the military interventions overseas. Optimism, he says, has surged. Confidence has returned since he's taken office, right? With this new confidence, we are also bringing back clarity to our thinking. We are reasserting these fundamental truths. Again, he says, a nation without borders is not a nation. Notice how important borders are. So if you are a defender of the border, the border scheme, you are effectively a nationalist, and you can't really be a free marketer, though, and a nationalist. Free marketers and nationalists really don't work together in the same breast, though many conservatives, as schizophrenics, think that they can. He says, a nation that is not prepared to win a war is not a nation capable of preventing a war. A nation that is not proud of its history cannot be confident of its future. And a nation that is not certain of its values cannot summon the will to defend them. Well, it all sounds very good and very, very patriotic, right? You have to be part of the nation. You, my listener, are just mistaken to think that local economy matters more. That the small things that you're concerned about, your local charity, dealing with the young member in the minority of a minority group whom you suspect may be interested in becoming a gang member, or maybe drawn into the gang life, you suspect, and so you're there trying to help him. You're trying to be a father figure to him. You take him out to eat on Saturdays by arrangement, and try to encourage him with a gospel message, or maybe encouragement about how the world works, because you're in business, right? These are things that are put into a small view. And the ideas of local control, the ideas of self-determination in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, or if you, my listener, are from a faraway place in your part of the world, right? You want what you have there. Well, this is David Tulis. We are all new Nooga Radio 92.7, FM 95.3 HD4. We are Chattanooga's new favorite home for news and talk. This is Nooga Radio, all new Nooga Radio 92.7 and 95.3 FM HD4. We have in President Trump's proposal less liberty, and which means less local economy, right? Less local self-determination, less state self-determination as well. He says our strategy advances four vital national interests. First, he says we must protect the American people, the homeland, and our great American way of life. Again, very strong nationalistic impulse here. This strategy recognizes that we cannot secure our nation if we do not secure our borders. Well, how is it, if that's true, how is it that the Hebrew Republic, which was surrounded among the children of Israel, was surrounded by warlike tribes such as Philistines, Ammonites, and Amalekites, and had an open border policy? How is that possible? Well, because those people, if you want to read those scriptures, lived in confidence of God's protection. The American people don't believe in God, and they don't have any confidence in God's protection, so they have to have all of their own defenses. He says, so for the first time ever, American strategy now includes a serious plan to defend our homeland. Really, this is the first time. A serious plan to defend our homeland. Where are the rivals of American hegemony on this continent? Where are the threats to Americans in North America? Well, there are none. There simply are no threats to this country. They don't exist. Now, if we have threats to people who are Americans serving in military garb overseas, well, that's different. You know, we have the enemy, all the enemies surrounded by our bases all around the world, and there we may face some threat because we are interveners, we are bringers of democracy, right? So we may be in danger. He goes on to say it calls for the construction of a wall, ending chain migration and the horrible visa and lottery programs, closing loopholes that undermine enforcement, and strongly supporting our Border Patrol agents, ICE officers, and Homeland Security personnel. What if you approve of that? If you, my listener, approve of that, what you have to accept are all the other appurtenances of the security state, right? The modern welfare security state, with all of its demands upon small business, all of its demands upon your time, effectively stealing your time and stealing your will. That's what we have. We have our wills stolen from us. Do you know how few small businesses are being created anymore? People are just so intimidated. They're so afraid. You have to immediately before starting a business, you almost have to have counsel on whom not to offend, right? All these different parties, you can't offend them. You've got to do these things. You have your advisor, your accountant, your business planner, all giving 15 steps you have to make of people you have to appease before you even which is premised on cash over credit and not leverage so much as in the national economy, but premised on grace and small scale service and local capitalism. And caller, thanks for calling. This is David Tulis. What's on your mind?
Hey, David, Charlie Goss here. How are you this morning?
Hey, Charlie, I'm fine. Thanks. Listen, what's the good news at Goss Company Jewelers over on Gun Barrel behind the Chili's? I know you've got some tips for my listener. What's on your mind?
Well, actually, I just getting going this morning, doing some custom earrings as we speak, and just want to give you a call and talk to your listeners for a second and let them know that I've been doing this personally for 35 years. Got over 100 years of family experience in the jewelry business, and just urge them to come out and see us today.
Well, now we're coming up on Christmas. It's 6 days away. Can you do something for my listener on kind of short notice, Charlie, or do you have to have always 2 weeks lead time?
If I don't have it in the store, I've been doing this for so long. I've got so many sources that I can still get the stuff shipped in overnight, and we can certainly fulfill their Christmas needs. And also, to help pay for any Christmas presents, they got gold laying around the house in a drawer collecting dust. I'll pay you cash for that as well. So that goes a long way.
Yeah, jewelers are buyers of gold and silver. So if you, the listener, would like to do a little bit of trading with Charlie Goss at Goss Company Jewelers, again, now you're a local business, and there's a lot of competition, Charlie Goss, in the jewelry business from national chains. We have a lot of national chains, maybe too many here in Chattanooga.
That's certainly right. And, you just go see these places, and the person behind the counter may or may not be there the next time you go in. They may or may not have any experience at all in the jewelry business. So we're an educated supplier, and we can help you. It can educate their customer as well.
Well, that's a great point that Charlie Goss is making. And now, again, your shop, Charlie, is behind the Chili's on Gun Barrel Road, kind of at the top of the hill there, past right near Hamilton Place Mall.
Yes, sir. We share the parking lot with the Chili's here, and just down the way from the Batteries Plus. So come see us. We'll take care of you for Christmas.
Okay. Well, listen. Thanks, Charlie, for calling. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
That's Charlie Goss, leading the jewelry business, the jewelry trade here in Chattanooga, with his local shop. Been in business for a long time. He knows the field inside out. So make sure you check with Charlie. If you need a gift, you, my listener, the guy listener, the man who matters, here at the all new Nooga Radio, go to Charlie Goss, and he'll take care of you. Very, very competitive prices and great selection. And what you have there is a real expert. And Marissa and Jeannie, the women behind the counter, know their business very well and are glad to help you. Just make sure you go by Goss Company Goss Company Jewelers in the Gun Barrel Road area. Now we're mentioning about Donald Trump's very, very fine speech about national security and the you might say the militarization of the economy, at least in the concept, right? What he says really doesn't change anything. What we have, and his saying these things and putting it in this perspective is not really new, and I don't think it suggests a major change out of Washington, but it's something at least to think about, because we here at the David Tulis Show, we make an argument for local. We argue that you should love your neighbor and buy local. You should effectively be kind of prejudiced, right, for your local supplier, your local expert. And with President Trump, the big idea of security, it all sounds very fine. There's a lot of draping of patriotism over what he says, but he really wants the security state, right? The security state that you want too, right? If you're a conservative, that's what you want by default. And I question you. I question whether this is the wise thing. He says, with this strategy, we're calling for a great reawakening of America, a resurgence of confidence, and a rebirth of patriotism, prosperity, and pride. He talks a lot about pride, and at the very end of his speech, he ends on the note of pride. He says, as long as we are proud and very proud of who we are, how we got here, and what we are fighting for to preserve, we will not fail. That smacks a bit of human pride. Though he does end his presentation with a reference to God, I think there's really more hubris in this presentation than then careful and prudent modesty, which I would suggest if you are careful and prudent and modest, you won't believe the high equity figures, the high stock market numbers. They are deceptive. There's not really a great deal, in my understanding, underneath those numbers. We are in a bubble, and that is because we've been drinking at the bowl of free money, which is a very rich alcoholic punch, for a decade since the meltdown. Leave me alone is what we should be saying, but this is not something that's in President Trump's view. He says every American has a role to play in this grand national effort, and he invites you today to take part in our vital mission. You can take part in his vital mission, or you can do as I suggest here on the David Tulis Show, live out the lococentric, Noogacentric ideal. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio,